When Love Becomes Vengeance. A complete romantic revenge story. Part 1, The Collision of Two Worlds. The Gallery Girl. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the Meridian Art Gallery, casting golden shadows across marble floors that always seemed cold beneath my feet. I moved quietly between the sculptures and paintings, my reflection ghosting across glass displays that protected art worth more than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. My name is Sofia Martinez, and I was invisible here, just another gallery assistant in a black blazer that had seen better days. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from the hospital. My hands trembled as I read it, the words blurring together through tears I refused to let fall. My younger brother, Daniel, needed another treatment. Another bill I couldn't pay. Another impossible choice between medication and rent. I was 26 years old and drowning in responsibilities that weren't supposed to be mine. Our parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving me to care for Daniel, who was only 17 when his leukemia diagnosis shattered what remained of our small family. I worked 3 jobs, the gallery during the day, a coffee shop in the evenings, and weekend shifts at a bookstore. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, and hope was becoming just as expensive. The auction night. Tonight, the gallery was hosting a private auction for Chicago's elite. Men in tailored suits and women dripping with diamonds wandered through the space, their laughter light and careless. I carried a tray of champagne glasses, weaving between conversations about vacation homes and stock portfolios, topics that felt like a foreign language. My supervisor, Catherine, had pulled me aside earlier with sharp instructions and sharper eyes. "Don't mess this up, Sophia. These people spend more on art in one night than you'll make in a year. Be invisible but efficient." I was good at being invisible. I'd had plenty of practice. The centerpiece of tonight's auction was a rare painting by a contemporary artist named Vivian Locke, estimated to sell for over $2 million. It hung in the center gallery, illuminated by carefully positioned lights that made the colors seem alive. The painting depicted a woman trapped in golden chains, her face a mixture of ecstasy and agony. I'd stared at it during my lunch breaks, feeling an uncomfortable recognition in her painted eyes. The accident that changed everything. The evening progressed smoothly until it didn't. I was refilling champagne glasses near the main display when a man's voice rose above the polite murmur of conversation. He was angry about something, gesturing wildly, his expensive watch catching the light. I stepped back to give him space, but my heel caught on the edge of the platform where the Vivian Locke painting stood. Time seemed to slow down. I felt myself falling backward, arms flailing for balance I couldn't find. My tray flew from my hands, champagne glasses spinning through the air like crystal birds. I crashed into the painting's display stand, and the entire structure tilted. The painting fell. I watched in horror as $2 million worth of art tumbled toward the marble floor. My body moved on instinct, lunging forward to catch it. My hands connected with the canvas, but my momentum was too strong. I fell on top of it, hearing the sickening sound of tearing fabric. The gallery went silent. Completely, utterly silent. When I pushed myself up, my hands were covered in paint. The woman in golden chains now had a jagged tear across her face, the canvas split from corner to corner. Champagne soaked into the damaged painting, making the colors run and bleed together. I had destroyed it. Completely and irreversibly destroyed it. "Oh God," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." Catherine's face had gone white. The auction attendees stood frozen, staring at the disaster like witnesses to a car crash. My mind raced with calculations, insurance, lawsuits, criminal charges. I would never be able to pay for this. Never. My entire life wouldn't be enough to cover this debt. Enter Alexander Kane. Everyone out. The voice came from the back of the gallery, deep and commanding. It wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. "The auction is postponed. You'll be notified when we reschedule." I looked up through tears to see a man walking toward me. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. His eyes were the color of steel in winter, cold and assessing. They fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I said everyone out," he repeated when no one moved. This time, people obeyed. Within minutes, the gallery had emptied except for me, him, and Catherine, who hovered nearby like a nervous bird. "Mr. Kane," Catherine began, her voice shaking. "I take full responsibility for this disaster. She's new, and I should have supervised more closely." "You're fired," he said without looking at her. "Take your things and leave." "But Mr. Kane." "Now." Catherine fled, leaving me alone with the man who apparently owned the gallery. Alexander Kane. I'd heard the name before in whispered conversations between the staff. He owned half of Chicago's real estate, had connections to politicians and business leaders, and never visited the gallery in person. Until tonight. The proposition. "Stand up," he ordered. My legs shook as I obeyed, still holding pieces of the ruined painting. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He stood at least 6 feet tall, and his presence seemed to fill the entire room. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless face. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia Martinez," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "How old are you, Sophia?" 26. He circled me slowly, studying me like I was one of the paintings on his walls. I felt exposed under his gaze, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with the destroyed art at my feet. "Do you know how much that painting was worth?" he asked. $2.3 million, I said. "I know I can't pay for it. I know I've destroyed something irreplaceable. I'll work for free, I'll do anything to make this right, but please don't press charges. I have a brother who depends on me, and if I go to jail..." "You have a brother?" He stopped in front of me, those cold eyes studying my face. "Tell me about him." The question caught me off guard. "He's 19. He has leukemia. He's in Northwestern Memorial Hospital right now, waiting for a bone marrow transplant that our insurance won't fully cover. That's why I work 3 jobs. That's why I'm so tired that I fell and destroyed your painting. Please, I'll do anything, but don't take me away from him. He has no one else." Something flickered in Alexander Kane's expression. For just a moment, the ice in his eyes seemed to crack, revealing something that might have been pain or recognition or both. "Anything?" he repeated softly. "Yes. Be careful making promises you don't understand, Sophia." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "I'm going to make you an offer. Listen carefully, because I'll only make it once." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'll pay for your brother's treatment," he said. "All of it. The transplant, the medications, the hospital bills. I'll make sure he gets the best care money can buy. I'll also pay off your student loans, your rent, and any other debts you're carrying. You'll never have to work 3 jobs again. You'll never have to choose between your brother's medicine and your own survival." It sounded too good to be true. It was too good to be true. "What do you want in return?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "You," he said simply. "Your time, your attention, your presence. You'll live in my penthouse, accompany me to social events, and be available when I need you. You'll belong to me in every way that matters, but you'll also be protected, provided for, and never have to struggle again." My mind reeled. "You want me to be your mistress?" "I want you to be mine." His hand came up to cup my jaw, tilting my face up to his. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but there was steel beneath the softness. "I saw you looking at that painting during your lunch breaks. I saw the recognition in your eyes when you stared at that woman in chains. You understand what it means to be trapped, don't you, Sophia? The difference is, I'm offering you a gilded cage with everything you need inside it. This is insane, I whispered. You don't even know me. I know you work yourself to exhaustion for someone you love. I know you're drowning in debt and responsibility. I know you're about to lose everything because of one accident. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending shivers down my spine. And I know that you're going to say yes, because the alternative is watching your brother die while you're crushed by debt you can never repay. The impossible choice. He was right, and we both knew it. What choice did I really have? I could refuse, maintain my pride and independence, and watch Daniel die because I couldn't afford his treatment. Or I could surrender my freedom to this stranger and save the only family I had left. How long? I asked. How long would this arrangement last? Until I decide it's over. He released my jaw but didn't step back. I'm not offering you a contract with an expiration date, Sophia. I'm offering you a new life. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Brave? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. This isn't about bravery. This is about survival. All the best decisions are. He pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out. This is my private number. You have 24 hours to decide. Call me and say yes, or don't call at all. But know that if you walk away from this offer, I'll still hold you responsible for the painting. I'll sue you for damages, and you'll spend the rest of your life paying off a debt you can never clear. The thread hung in the air between us, crystal clear. This wasn't really a choice at all. It was an ultimatum wrapped in the illusion of free will. I need to think, I said, taking the card with shaking hands. Don't think too long. He stepped back, putting distance between us that felt both like relief and loss. Your brother doesn't have time for you to deliberate. According to my information, he needs that transplant within the next 2 months, or his chances of survival drop significantly. My blood ran cold. How do you know that? His smile was sharp as broken glass. I told you, Sophia. I know everything about you. I've known since the moment you started working here. The accident tonight merely accelerated my timeline. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This hadn't been spontaneous. He'd been watching me, gathering information, waiting for his moment. The accident had been my fault, but his response had been calculated and deliberate. Who are you? I whispered. Really? Someone who takes what he wants, Alexander Kane replied. And I've decided I want you. The first night of captivity. I left the gallery in a daze, Alexander's business card burning like a coal in my pocket. The night air was cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was racing with impossible calculations, trying to find a way out that didn't exist. I went straight to the hospital to see Daniel. He was asleep when I arrived, his face pale against white pillows, and 4 lines running into his arm. He looked so young, so fragile. Our mother's dark hair, our father's gentle eyes. He was all I had left of our family, and I would do anything to keep him alive. Anything. Even surrender myself to a stranger who looked at me like I was a possession he'd decided to acquire. I stayed by Daniel's bedside until the nurses made me leave, then walked the Chicago streets for hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. By the time I returned to my tiny apartment, the sun was rising, and I'd made my decision. Really, there had never been a choice at all. I called the number on the card. Alexander answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. Yes or no, Sophia? His voice was calm, controlled. Yes, I whispered. I'll do it. Smart girl. A car will pick you up in 2 hours. Bring whatever matters to you. Everything else will be provided. Alexander. Mr. Kane, he corrected. You'll call me Alexander only when we're alone. In public, you'll show proper respect. The words stung, but I swallowed my pride. Mr. Kane, I need to know my brother will be taken care of. He's already been transferred to a private room with the best oncology team in Chicago. The transplant is scheduled for next week. They found a perfect match. He paused. You're mine now, Sophia. That means what matters to you matters to me. Your brother will have everything he needs. Tears streamed down my face, relief and despair mixing together until I couldn't tell them apart. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. You don't know what you've agreed to. The line went dead. 2 hours later, a black Mercedes pulled up outside my building. The driver, a large man with cold eyes, helped me load my few belongings into the trunk. I took one last look at my apartment, at the life I was leaving behind, and climbed into the car. Chicago's skyline glittered in the morning sun as we drove toward Alexander Kane's penthouse. Toward my gilded cage. Toward a future I couldn't predict and couldn't escape. I thought about the painting I'd destroyed, the woman trapped in golden chains with that expression of ecstasy and agony. Now I understood that look completely. Sometimes salvation and imprisonment wore the same face, and you couldn't have one without accepting the other. The car pulled up to a building that made my breath catch. Glass and steel reaching toward the sky, doormen in uniforms, marble and money everywhere I looked. This was Alexander Kane's world, and now it would be mine too. The driver led me to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. We rose in silence, the numbers climbing higher and higher until they stopped at the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city below, furniture that was more art than practical, and a sense of wealth so profound it felt oppressive. Alexander stood by the windows, his back to me, hands in his pockets. He wore different clothes now, dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms marked with scars I hadn't noticed before. Scars that suggested violence in his past. Welcome home, Sophia, he said without turning around. Home. The word felt like a lie, but I supposed it would have to become the truth. This was my life now. My cage might be gilded, but the bars were just as real. And somewhere deep inside, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, a small voice whispered that maybe I'd wanted this. Maybe I'd been waiting for someone strong enough to take away my choices, to lift the crushing weight of responsibility from my shoulders. Maybe Alexander Kane hadn't trapped me at all. Maybe I'd walked into this cage willingly, relieved to finally stop fighting. The thought terrified me more than anything else that had happened. Part 2, The Web of Obsession. Life Behind Glass. 3 weeks passed in Alexander Kane's penthouse, and I learned that luxury could be its own kind of prison. The apartment was beautiful, spacious, filled with expensive art and furniture that I was afraid to touch. My bedroom suite was larger than my entire former apartment, with a bathroom of marble and gold fixtures that felt like a museum. But I wasn't free to come and go as I pleased. Alexander had rules. So many rules. I couldn't leave without his permission. I couldn't contact friends from my old life. I had to dress in clothes he'd selected, a wardrobe of designer dresses and shoes that probably cost more than I used to make in a year. When he needed me, I had to appear immediately, no matter what I was doing. In return, he kept his promises. Daniel was thriving under his new medical team. The transplant had been successful, and he was recovering faster than anyone expected. I visited him 3 times a week, always accompanied by Alexander's driver, Marcus, not the same Marcus from later, just the driver's name, who waited in the car and reported my movements back to his employer. Alexander himself was an enigma. Some days he was almost kind, asking about my day, ensuring I had everything I needed. He never touched me beyond the occasional hand at my lower back when we attended social events together. We slept in separate rooms. But other days, his possessiveness emerged in ways that made my skin crawl. The charity gala. "You'll wear the black dress tonight," Alexander said one evening, appearing in the doorway of my room without knocking. He never knocked. This was his apartment, and I was his possession. Privacy was another luxury I'd surrendered. "Where are we going?" I asked, looking up from the book I'd been reading. "A charity gala. Several important people will be there," and you'll be on your best behavior." His eyes traveled over me with an intensity that made me feel naked despite being fully clothed. "You represent me now, Sophia. Everything you do reflects on my reputation." The gala was held at the Palmer House, a historic hotel in downtown Chicago. I'd walked past it 1,000 times in my old life, never imagining I'd enter through the front doors on the arm of one of the city's most powerful men. Alexander's hand rested possessively on my waist as we entered the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos. A string quartet played in the corner. Champagne flowed freely from strategically placed bars. "Stay close," Alexander murmured in my ear. "Don't wander off. Don't talk to anyone unless I introduce you first." I nodded, feeling like a doll being displayed. We moved through the crowd, and I watched Alexander transform. The cold, controlling man from the penthouse became charming and charismatic, shaking hands and making small talk with the ease of someone born to wealth and power. "Alexander." A woman's voice rang out, sharp and carrying. "I didn't expect to see you here." The woman approaching us was stunning in a predatory way, with platinum blonde hair and a red dress that clung to curves that were probably surgical. Her eyes, cold and assessing, fixed on me with immediate dislike. "Victoria," Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" Victoria's smile was all teeth. "You know, I never miss an opportunity to support children's literacy." Her gaze slid to me. "And who is this? Your latest acquisition?" The word stung, probably because it was accurate. "This is Sophia," Alexander said, his hand tightening on my waist. "Sophia, this is Victoria Ashford. We used to be engaged." The revelation hit me like cold water. Engaged. He'd never mentioned having a fiancé, though I suppose there was a lot he hadn't told me about his past. "Used to be," Victoria's smile turned brittle. "Until Alexander decided he preferred his business empire to building a life with another person." "I hope you're not expecting different treatment, darling. He collects beautiful things, but he doesn't know how to love them." Meeting Marcus Chen. Before Alexander could respond, another man joined our group. He was Asian, probably in his early 40s, with an easy smile and warm eyes that crinkled at the corners. Everything about him radiated approachability, the exact opposite of Alexander's cold intensity. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care if he was. "Marcus," Alexander's voice dropped several degrees. "I didn't know you'd be attending tonight." "I wouldn't miss it. Children's literacy is a cause close to my heart." Marcus turned his attention to me, and his smile widened. "And you must be the mysterious Sophia I've been hearing about." Marcus Chen. He extended his hand. I glanced at Alexander, unsure if I was allowed to accept the handshake. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching beneath his skin. After a moment, he gave a barely perceptible nod. Marcus's handshake was warm and firm. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Any friend of Alexander's is worth knowing, though I must say, you're far more interesting than his usual companions." "Thank you," I managed, aware of the tension radiating from Alexander. "We should move on," Alexander said tersely. "There are other people I need to speak with." "Of course." Marcus released my hand but didn't stop smiling. "Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk later, Sophia. I'd love to hear your perspective on some of the art pieces being auctioned tonight." As Alexander steered me away, I felt his fingers digging into my waist hard enough to leave bruises. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. "A rival," Alexander said through clenched teeth. "Stay away from him." But fate, or perhaps Marcus himself, had other plans. An hour later, I found myself alone near one of the auction displays while Alexander was pulled into a conversation with city officials. The piece being displayed was a sculpture of a bird breaking free from a cage, its wings spread in flight. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus appeared beside me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered me one. "The artist is from South Korea." She specializes in pieces about freedom and captivity. I accepted the glass, knowing I shouldn't but unable to help myself. It's stunning. You have good taste. Marcus studied the sculpture with genuine appreciation. Though I wonder if you chose to look at this particular piece for a reason. What do you mean? A bird escaping its cage? He glanced at me with knowing eyes. It's rather on the nose, don't you think? Sophia, I don't mean to overstep, but I know Alexander Kane's reputation. If you ever need help. Sophia. Alexander's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. He appeared at my side, his face a mask of controlled rage. We're leaving. Now. The jealous rage. The car ride back to the penthouse was silent and terrifying. Alexander stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. I sat as far from him as possible, my heart racing with a fear I didn't want to acknowledge. When we entered the apartment, he exploded. What the hell were you thinking? He rounded on me, his voice low and dangerous. I gave you one instruction. 1. Stay away from Marcus Chen. He approached me, I protested. I was looking at a sculpture, and he started talking. I didn't seek him out. You accepted champagne from him. You smiled at him. You let him stand close enough to touch you. Alexander stalked toward me, and I backed away instinctively. Do you have any idea who that man is? What he's capable of? No. You don't tell me anything about your life, your business, your past. I'm just supposed to sit here looking pretty and following your rules. Yes. The word came out as a roar. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. I own you, Sophia. Every breath you take, every word you speak, every smile you give, it all belongs to me. I saved your brother's life. I gave you everything you needed. And this is how you repay me? By flirting with my enemy? I wasn't flirting. I was being polite to someone who showed me basic human kindness, something you wouldn't understand. The words hung in the air between us. I saw the moment they hit him, the flash of something that might have been hurt before his expression hardened into stone. Basic human kindness, he repeated softly. Dangerously. Is that what you think this is? You think Marcus Chen was being kind to you out of the goodness of his heart? He moved so fast I didn't have time to react. One moment he was across the room, the next his hand was wrapped around my throat, not squeezing hard enough to choke but firm enough to make his point. He backed me against the wall, his body caging mine. Marcus Chen wants to destroy me, Alexander said, his face inches from mine. He's wanted that for years. And tonight, he saw you and realized you could be his weapon. Every smile, every kind word, every moment of attention he gave you was calculated to make me jealous, to make me lose control. And it worked, I gasped. You're proving him right. His grip loosened slightly. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. You need to understand something, Sophia. I don't share. I don't compromise. When I say you're mine, I mean it in the most absolute sense possible. If Marcus Chen touches you, speaks to you, even looks at you again, I will destroy him. And then I'll make sure you understand exactly what it means to betray my trust. He released me, stepping back. I slid down the wall, my legs unable to hold me up anymore. Tears streamed down my face, and I hated myself for crying, for showing weakness in front of him. Go to your room, Alexander said, his voice empty. I don't want to see you right now. Uncovering the truth. I spent the next 3 days locked in my room, meals delivered by the housekeeper who wouldn't meet my eyes. Alexander didn't come to see me, didn't call or text or acknowledge my existence. The isolation was its own kind of punishment, and it worked. By the 3rd day, I was desperate for any human contact, even his. But I also used the time to think. To really examine the situation I'd trapped myself in. Alexander's jealous rage had been terrifying, yes, but it had also revealed cracks in his controlled facade. He was possessive to the point of obsession, controlling to the point of cruelty. But why? What had made him this way? I started searching the penthouse when I was sure I was alone. Alexander had an office, always locked, but the housekeeper kept a master curing in the kitchen. My hands shook as I unlocked the door, knowing I was crossing a line I could never uncross. The office was pristine, like everything else in Alexander's life. A massive desk dominated the room, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves behind it. I moved to the desk, opening drawers with growing urgency. That's where I found them. Files. Documents. Information that made my blood run cold. There were background checks on me that went back years. Every job I'd ever held, every address I'd lived at, every credit card transaction I'd made. He'd been watching me long before I'd ever walked into his gallery. But that wasn't the worst of it. I found medical records for Daniel. Records that showed his leukemia had suddenly worsened 3 months ago after a period of stability. Records that noted unusual chemical markers in his blood work, markers consistent with poisoning. And a handwritten note in Alexander's precise script, subject responded to treatment. Condition worsened as predicted. Begin phase 2. The papers slipped from my numb fingers, scattering across the expensive carpet. Alexander had made Daniel worse. He'd deliberately worsened my brother's condition to make me desperate enough to accept his offer. Everything, the accident at the gallery, his sudden appearance, his generous proposition, it had all been orchestrated. I was going to be sick. Find something interesting? I spun around to find Alexander leaning in the doorway, his expression unreadable. How long had he been standing there? You poisoned my brother, I whispered. You made him sicker. You created the desperation you claimed to be saving me from. I gave him a temporary setback, Alexander corrected, pushing off the doorway. The treatment I arranged fixed the damage and then some. Daniel is healthier now than he's been in years. You're insane. I backed away from him, my mind reeling. You're actually insane. I'm practical. He moved toward me with predatory grace. I saw something I wanted, and I created the circumstances to acquire it. Your brother was never in real danger, Sophia. I would never have let him die. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say? You're not. He smiled, and it was the saddest expression I'd ever seen on his face. That's the point. You're not supposed to trust me. You're supposed to be too afraid to leave, too grateful for your brother's health, too trapped by circumstances to have any choice but to stay. Why? The question came out as a sob. Why go to such lengths? You're rich, powerful, handsome, you could have anyone. Why force me into this? Because I don't want anyone, Alexander said quietly. I want you. The business rival's plan. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't stay with Alexander, not after learning what he'd done. But I couldn't simply run away either. He had too much power, too many resources. He would find me, and the consequences would be terrible. I needed help. I needed someone with power equal to Alexander's. I needed Marcus Chin. Using a burner phone I'd bought weeks ago and hidden in my room, some part of me had been planning escape all along. I called the number on the business card Marcus had slipped into my hand at the gala. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, he said without preamble. You knew I would? I know Alexander Kane. I know what he's capable of, and I saw the fear in your eyes behind the makeup and pretty dress. You're in trouble, Sophia. Let me help you. We met the next day at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where Alexander's people wouldn't think to look for me. I'd told the driver I had a doctor's appointment and slipped out the back of the clinic. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a view of both exits. Security precautions. Thank you for meeting me, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Of course. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. Vanilla latte, if I remember correctly from the gala. The gesture of kindness made my throat tight. When was the last time someone had paid attention to my preferences? I need to get away from Alexander, I said without preamble.